This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
5 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your weekend. And we say Merry Christmas in July to all of you that celebrate as you look at the calendar as we move through the deepest part of the dog days of summer. Another exciting program today, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're listening or calling us, whether it's still Friday evening or early Saturday morning, no matter where you are around the nation, around the world, remember, Talk Radio 77 WABC, heard in 173 countries, all 50 states, and I'm confident, ladies and gentlemen, even out into the deep part of the cosmos. From Earth to the moon to the planets and on to the infinite, now the many mysteries of the universe. And to be part of our 2-hour show with great guests and great topics, we like the one part of the 4 types of conversation the best. We like dialogue. So feel free to call in with your questions and comments at 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. Email me. I appreciate the emails. Always respond promptly. DRSKY, of course, at WABCRadio.com. And to listen to not only our podcasts that go on into infinity, but to all the other great hosts that make up Talk Radio 77 WABC, simply go to WABCRadio.com or RedAppleAudioNetworks.com. Thanks to Tony and Bill, our helmsmen, the navigators, who navigate the powerful signal of WABC. As I mentioned before, to you, the nation, the world, and out to the cosmos, ladies and gentlemen. And in this iteration of the Dr. Sky Experience for 2 hours with your calls at 1-800-848-9222, we're going to not only celebrate more about the 56th anniversary of one of the greatest technological feats ever in human history, the successful landing of astronauts back July the 20th, 1969. We'll be talking a little bit more about the moon, not only about the romance of the moon, the beauty and spirituality of the moon, but we'll be talking to 2 special guests in our iteration here of the Dr. Sky Experience, talking about things, yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever wondered about seeing things from brightly lit cities, we're going to be talking about the moon in many different aspects, from the spiritual side to the observational side. But first, ladies and gentlemen, with all the sad passing of many celebrities this week, I wanted to give a shout-out and a tribute, of course, and respect to a gentleman known as Felix Baumgartner. Who was he? The highest parachute jump ever in the world, at the time, was done by my friend Colonel Joe Kittinger, who had a lot to do with the Roswell case, believe it or not. But back on August the 16th, 1960, with Project Excelsior, Colonel Joe went up in a balloon to 102,800 feet, and he free-falled with his jump of 4 minutes and 36 seconds. His body traveled 614 miles per hour. But sadly, a good friend of mine, and maybe many of you who knew him in the military, he passed on to the infinite December 9th of 2022 at age 94. But in our tribute to Austrian skydiver Felix Baumgartner, who beat Colonel Joe's record back on October the 14th of 2012. What did he do? He jumped from a balloon at 127,852 feet in New Mexico on a project called Red Bull Stratos. The first human, and I mean this, to break the sound barrier outside of the vehicle, his body on that jump at 843.6 miles per hour. He sadly perished, ladies and gentlemen, about a week ago, July 17th, in a powered paraglide accident in Italy. Our respect to all those that gave their life to the study of the atmosphere and the skies. But in this 2-hour radio show, ladies and gentlemen, with your participation, we're going to be talking with 2 different individuals. We'll be introducing Richard Dugan, a friend of mine, a talk show host of his own, who does a program called Tell Me Your Story. He gets into more of the spiritual side of all the topics with his own great guests. And also, ladies and gentlemen, a book that I'm hardly able to hold in my hand, a book written by a gentleman named Robert Reeves. A Firefly book. The book itself weighs a number of pounds, but it's great. It's called The Photographic Atlas of the Moon, a comprehensive guide for the amateur astronomer. So much of what we'll be talking about today. So first, let me introduce our special guest, Robert Reeves. He took his first lunar photograph in 1959. In 1984, he began publishing articles about astrophotography, and since then, his articles have appeared in Sky and Telescope, Astronomy, Deep Sky Journal, and Amateur Astronomy. An author of 6 previous books, Reeves enjoys speaking about astronomy and spreading his passion for the moon and photographing the heavens. And in other disciplines, he has lots of experience too. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, he has a deep appreciation for the maintenance and modification of nuclear weapons. Yes, I said that. But he's here with us. And also joining us, talk show host Richard Dugan of Tell Me Your Story. Let's say good morning to both of you. Good morning, Richard, and good morning, Robert. Are you with us on the Dr. Sky?
Good morning. I am here and ready to go.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you and, excuse me, all the locations that you're at, as we continue to talk about these very important subjects here. Well, let's start off with Robert. Robert, this is fascinating. I'm holding this book here, and the publisher, a Firefly book. The thing must weigh about 4 pounds, but let me say this. This book, ladies and gentlemen, if you're ever fascinated about the moon, from the ability to observe it as an object in the heavens, tell us what got you started to do this book, because it's jam-packed with everything, and I wish we had 22 hours to talk about it. But your passion for writing this, tell us a little more about that book and how it evolved.
Well, it may take 22 hours to explain the convoluted path that the book came into being.
Sure.
This book is almost an accident. Let me back up about 10 years.
Okay.
I wrote 3 books for a astronomy publishing firm called Wilman Bell. They went out of business about 4 years ago when the owners retired. They got old, closed the company, transferred all the assets to Sky Publishing, which is what at the time was the parent of Sky and Telescope magazine. But the owners of Wilman Bell asked me to write a book about the moon about 10 years ago. It evolved into a 3-book series, which I call Men, Machines, and the Moon. The first volume, was about the astronomers that explored the moon prior to the space age. The Machines middle version was about the space age exploration of the moon. Then the final volume, the Moon, explained the physical moon. Eventually, Wilma Bell decided they didn't want to do a book that big, so they shrank it down to just the moon. And then they decided to wind down the company, and it was never published. So the manuscript sat on my shelf for about, 2 years, and I finally decided, I'm going to publish the darn thing myself. In the meantime, I had spoken to Firefly about other things. My moon pictures appear in other books, primarily the Backyard Astronomer's Guide, a fantastic book for beginner astronomers as well as experienced astronomers that just covers all aspects of astronomy. So they were familiar with my work, but I self-published the Moon book that I had written. I titled it Exploring the Moon with Robert Reeves, and I very pretentiously put my name in the title to separate it from the dozen other books out there also titled Exploring the Moon. Well, about a week after Amazon released my book about 2 years ago, Firefly called me up, said, "Are you still interested in doing that book about the moon?" I said, "Oh boy, a week too late, friends." So we talked about it a little bit and decided to do a completely new book. And that's how the Photographic Lunar Atlas evolved. And working.
Well, Robert, that's a fascinating story, not to cut you short there, but I'm saying when people hear this story, I want to focus on 2 dimensions here, because we can talk the science, and that's you, and we can also talk the wonders of the moon and what it means. But let me start off with you, Robert, in the philosophic side of the world. What does simply the moon mean to you in the simplest way possible? And maybe not from the scientific side. What would you say?
The moon, it's been part of the human psyche for as long as humanity's been on the Earth. There's evidence that cavemen 22,000 years ago had an interest in the moon and recorded the lunar cycles. So the moon has been in the sky, part of our culture, part of our heritage for as long as there's been humanity. So the moon is part of us, whether we know it or not. We have a connection to the moon through our not only our culture, but through our physical heritage with our ancestors. Now, the city lights and the evolution of light pollution and so forth has somewhat separated the average person from the night sky. Back when I was a child, well, even up until the point where I joined the Navy, the city lights were not so bright. I could see the Milky Way from my backyard in the middle of the
Big changes, Robert. Big changes around the world. You're right. And here I'm in Phoenix, and obviously listeners all over in major cities. I want to encourage them to partake in this because let's jump and move over to Richard Dugan, talk show host. Richard, in the simplest way for you, spiritually, what does the moon mean to you? So we have both sides covered for people that think they're going to get a 2-hour lecture on science. No, we're going to open up our minds about the mysteries of the universe. Richard Dugan, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's interesting. I prefer the new moon period. I don't know why I don't care for the full moon period. The light, it's like, okay, the sun went down. I want it dark. But it's a fascinating study that I've looked into in terms of human behavior and how our human behavior seems to change cyclically through a given month. I find it fascinating, too, that our calendars aren't lunar-based because there are some months we have 2 full moons, for example. But
exactly.
You notice the activities of human beings. A lot of times when it is a full moon for what, and there is no real explanation that I'm aware of other than when there's a full moon or we're approaching it and then we're leaving it, waxing and waning. Some people just seem to go nuts, committing crimes, bizarre behavior.
Yes.
But there are others who will take the time from a spiritual or metaphysical perspective to create and practice certain meditations, certain prayer ceremonies and rituals around both the full moon, the new moon, and the half waxing and the half waning, and then even the other phases of the moon cycle, feeling that it makes a difference. It gives them a real connection to Mother Nature.
You're right, and let me just jump in here because obviously this is a passionate subject for many people. I mean, the romance side of that, we'll get into that with you, Richard, and also with Robert. But I have to say this much. Let's go back into history, gentlemen, and everybody listening around the world. Selene, or selenography. Who was Selene? The Greek goddess of the moon. She was the daughter of the Titans Hyperion and Thea, which we'll talk about with Robert, as to maybe one of the consequences of how the moon and where it came from as we move through time and space on this. Ladies and gentlemen, your concerns about the moon as we just get started here on the Dr. Sky Experience, your questions in the form of a great dialogue at 1-800-848-9222 as you begin your weekend, ladies and gentlemen, as we talk about Christmas in July, the middle period of the dog days of summer, and tonight, to everybody listening around the nation and the world, I know, Robert, I sent you a picture of what I looked at tonight, right here from Phoenix, the 1.28-day-old moon, and we'll get into a big explanation of this. But, gentlemen, I want to start off with Robert to talk a little bit more about what his book is all about. So, Robert, if you don't mind, try to answer this one before we go to the bottom of the hour here, because this one has me perplexed, and I've studied this, no better than most people, but certainly, with a steady focus. Here's the question I wanted to ask Robert Reeves, author of The Photographic Atlas of the Moon, a comprehensive guide for the amateur astronomer. Tell us why we see one side of the moon always, because a lot of people mix this thing up. Why do we only see one side of the moon when it's going around us? Robert, you're on.
Well, the moon rotates exactly the same period as its orbital period. So it is rotating one time every time it rotates around the Earth. Now, do this little thought experiment. Visualize this. Pretend that you are sitting still and a friend is standing in front of you holding a globe. And he has one side of that globe facing you, and he slowly circles around you and keeps that globe facing, the same side of that globe facing toward you. Now, as he completes his full circle around you, a third person looking from the side would see that globe rotate 360 degrees, whereas you in the center, being the Earth, pretending that you're the Earth, you only see that one side of the globe because it rotates exactly the same period as it takes for the globe, for the moon to completely orbit the Earth.
Precisely.
So, the same side always faces us. So somebody looking from afar will see the globe rotate one time, but you in the middle, pretending that you're the Earth, will see the globe not move at all. The same face will always point toward you. And that is proof that it is indeed rotating. Because if it wasn't rotating, once the moon orbits halfway around the world, then you're looking at the backside of it.
That's exactly right.
The moon is rotating, so it keeps the same face toward us, because its rotation is gravitationally locked toward the Earth. The moon is slightly lopsided. So over millions of years, the gravitational attraction between the Earth and the moon has stabilized it so that it is gravitationally synchronized. The rotation of the moon is gravitationally synchronized with its orbital period. So,
no, you say it well.
That's why we only see one side of the moon.
Well, you say it so well, and this is very interesting. I've heard so many iterations of that, Robert. And obviously some of them were pretty laughable. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a big fan of Pink Floyd, so you always hear about the dark side of the moon. So let's set our coordinates right. When you look at the near side of the moon, that's what we're talking about, and that so-called dark side, sorry, Pink Floyd fans out there, we still love you dearly, as I love the band myself, and why not? Great music from all time and all history as we talk about that band, but the backside is the far side. So when we talk about that, if you're ever going to take a journey to the moon, the radio listeners of the Dr. Sky Experience now know the big difference, the not to be called the dark side of the moon. But Richard, before we go to the bottom of the hour here, I just wanted to talk with you about something. And chime in, guys, and people chime in too, because this is fascinating. There's a thing called pareidolia. And what's that? You see faces in patterns. What is that? The man in the moon? Isn't that appropriate for the show? And some people see faces in clouds. But this is interesting. And then it gets even to a bigger discussion of something, if you're a big fan of horror movies, I'm talking about the Lon Chaney's and the great days of sci-fi and horror movies, lycanthropy. What's that? Where a person summarily changes into a wolf, the wolf man, and the beauty of the full moon and wolves howling at the moon. So, Richard Dugan, isn't that interesting? People see faces, which there is a face in the moon. They can maybe see faces in clouds, this pareidolia. Well, that's kind of fascinating. So take us down that path for a moment. That's an interesting thing.
It is indeed. And, of course, the same thing with Mars. I mean, people see that face on Mars and wonder how the heck that got there. I think that a lot of times our imaginations really take us in places that we wonder how we got there. But there's nothing wrong with that. And I think, too, that for each individual, they're going to see different things because we all have, we've all been through different phases and experiences in life. But if it gives one pause and a feeling of connection to the universe, if you will, both on a natural or Mother Nature type of area as well as spiritual.
Exactly right. Mm-hmm.
I think that can really go a long way. I mean, there were even people who used to say that the moon was made of green cheese. Now, I don't know where they came up with the green part, because even from the surface of the Earth, when we look at the full moon, it's not green. So where did they get the green cheese?
Well, that's interesting. Anyway, yeah, I know. Because there was a French film, I don't know, somebody jump in on this, where actually it's so funny. It's like they have this rocket that they made. I think it's a silent movie. And it's one of the classics. Mm-hmm. I forget the name. I don't speak French. But apparently in the early 1900s, right, Robert? And right,
from the Earth to
Richard,
the moon.
Yeah, and you see this face, and it actually hits it looking like it's a coconut cream pie. So this whole lore of the moon is just a fascinating thing. And folks, as we get into this conversation here, what's your thoughts about this? I mean, talk to us both from the romance side of the moon. I mean, we see Moonstruck, a great movie of days gone by. We see all these dedicated, songs, and we'll have a few to play here during this particular archive and this iteration of the Dr. Sky Experience. But then, when we come back from the break in just a few minutes, we're going to talk, of course, with Robert Reeves, author of this great book, ladies and gentlemen. If you ever wanted a good book, not to go just on the coffee table, but one that you can use, it's simply called The Photographic Atlas of the Moon, a comprehensive guide for the amateur astronomer. And this is interesting. It's from what? Firefly Books or Firefly Press, if I can get that right? A Firefly book is more correct.
Yes, so Firefly Books, based in Toronto, Canada, but they publish worldwide.
Yes. No, it's fascinating stuff. So let's talk about this. I was out there this evening looking, beautifully clear skies, horribly hot here in Phoenix. Today was like 110. And obviously all over the listening audience, we got this big heat bubble out there. But examining the moon right now, this thinnest of crescents, right, Robert? And describe this. This is interesting. When we talk about the age of the moon, when I said before the moon is 1.28 days old, many people will scratch their head and say, that can't be right. The moon's billions of years old. Describe that briefly, because that's interesting when we talk about the date of the age of the moon calendar-wise.
Well, when we call the day of the moon, it's the day, how long it's been since the moment of new moon. That's the beginning of the lunation. The lunation goes from new moon through the crescent phases, to quarter phase, to full, back to the waning quarter moon, and then the waning crescent phases back to new moon again. This takes about 29 days. So the moment of new moon, that's 0 hour. 1 day later, the moon is 1 day old. 2 days is when we usually see it for the first time, the very thin crescent above the western horizon. By day 3, it's easily visible. And sometimes people even see the complete full moon faintly glowing by light reflected from the Earth, illuminating the shadow side of the moon. And during these phases, it's what I call the Cheshire Cat moon, where we just see this little thin crescent that looks like the Cheshire Cat's smile after the Cheshire Cat disappeared in the Tales of Alice in Wonderland. So as the moon goes through the entire cycle, it goes all the way back to day 29 as it approaches new moon, and then back to 0 at the moment of new moon, and the cycle begins again.
Yes, this is fascinating because, folks, if you're a city dweller, and this is where I get a lot of people who do email me, and if you'd like to, more than happy to respond to you in detail, DRSKY, Dr. Sky, at WABCRadio.com. All your questions, we appreciate those. I've met a lot of new friends from this particular radio archive, and I'm so grateful for that and for the station's confidence in having me do this show. But equally important, it's so amazing. This program is actually kind of dedicated more to our city dwellers because, as you were talking about, Robert, and Richard also, about the romance of the moon, this is something that you can do. You could be right downtown, let's say, in Manhattan. You could be in Central Park. You could be standing along one of the streets, and you obviously can look through the big, skyscraper canyons, and you can see it. But we're going to get into a conversation later in this conversation for 2 hours about ways to view it, because let me say this, folks. Many of you out there may think mistakenly you have to have this large, massive telescope. We recommend binoculars for people to view it, and we'll get into that conversation. But what's more important than that? Your participation with your questions. I know you're out there. And our appeal for this particular show is not only for our regular callers that we love and respect, but folks, how about people that are driving trucks, men and women across the nation, all over the location? And of course, they may be sitting there in their truck getting ready to start the new day that they have in hours from now. Your questions, because you're kind of our eyes and ears out there on the great highways, and you're listening to the WABC show here, Talk Radio 77, with me, Steve Cates, Dr. Sky, and something that we call the Dr. Sky Experience. What do we talk about, in case you're a first-time listener, and hopefully a first-time caller too? The great subjects of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather. Celebrity guests in the mix, and don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, we talk about stories of American exceptionalism and so much more. And that's fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. You tell us in all the emails how much you appreciate the topics, but what makes the show best? It's the humble host. No. Yes, it's the great guests that we have on this particular radio station. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we move on to the hard break in radio here for part of Hour 1, we welcome your calls once again at 1-800-848-9222. We'll be right back as we continue to talk about the wonders of the moon, both philosophically and observationally. Stay tuned.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Moonlight is sculpture. Sunlight is painting. A quote from the great poet Nathaniel Hawthorne. We thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience. Deep into hour number 1 at 32 minutes after the hour, we welcome your conversation in the form of dialogue at 1-800-848-9222. In case you're just joining us, and thank you for staying with us, we're talking about the wonders and splendor of the moon. 56 years ago, many of you weren't even born, when Apollo astronauts landed on the surface of the moon with Apollo 11, a most momentous time in history. Many people out there may not even believe it, but the astronauts brought back a number of moon rocks and successfully completed what President Kennedy had called for, sending a man to the moon and returning him safely back to the Earth. But today and this morning we talk about the moon itself, not only from the romance of the moon, the spirituality of the moon, but also the observational side with our guest Robert Reeves, author of Photographic Atlas of the Moon, and longtime radio host Richard Dugan of Tell Me Your Story. Robert, let's start with you and talk about some of the facts about the moon when we see it. Many people out there may go, wow, I can't believe you're telling us this story, and here's the story I'd love you to tell us. When you see that moon and you see the crescent, a lot of times in the next few nights, ladies and gentlemen, pay attention to this. You'll see to the left edge of the lit part of the moon this ghostly image. We call it earthshine. Robert, tell us more about it, because I think it has a lot to do with Leonardo da Vinci, as I've read, one of the great, you can say he did everything, art, science, technology. What is earthshine?
Earthshine is basically sunlight that has reflected off of the Earth and bounced back onto the moon and illuminated the shadow side of the moon very faintly. You can see this primarily in the early crescent phases when the moon is still very young, only 3 or 4 days old. And you notice this above the western horizon. You see the crescent that I call the Cheshire Cat moon, and look real close, and you'll faintly see the rest of the moon as well. And we have a term for that. It's called the new moon in the arms of the old.
Wow!
And it's very, very poetic, and it's inspiring. I'm not a poet myself. I don't claim to be. But looking at a scene like that, it is inspiring. It moves me, and
it does.
But people will look for this phenomenon over the next few days. And if you're lucky to be in where it's clear, well, right now San Antonio is cloudy. But if you're lucky enough to have some clear skies in the evening, go out over the next few days and see if you can spot the ghostly new moon in the arms of the old.
It's beautiful. I have these giant binoculars, which we won't go into in great detail. They weigh about 80 pounds, and you put them on the telescope. They're reverse binoculars. And not to make everybody, jealous about it, you can get a pair of binoculars yourself and see most of what we're talking about. But it looks so surreal when you're looking through these binoculars and you see that ghostly image. So, more precisely, I was good friends with, from Apollo 14, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and I said to him many times in asking, I said, when you guys were on the moon with Alan Shepard, I said, you looked up at the Earth. And he said, well, we were kind of busy. We kind of got lost on the surface. We were pulling that rickshaw with the lunar rocks, and our oxygen was in the yellow. I said, did you ever look up at the Earth? And he told me this, and I'll never forget it. And this is a memorial to Dr. Edgar Mitchell. He said to me, the Earth on the lunar surface is 4 times, ladies and gentlemen, the size of the biggest full moon you've ever seen. We could see the continents, half of the Earth in daylight, the big cities of the world. That basically just was out of this world. I knew it, folks. Our 2 special guests, Richard Dugan and Robert Reeves, are lighting up the phone line. So let's start off the conversation. We love dialogue. Let's say good morning to Bill in Huntington. You're on with our esteemed guests. And how are you this morning?
Okay. Now, in my understanding, the moon precesses a little bit so that the face of the full moon turns over the course of a decade by maybe 15%, and you can see a little more of its surface.
Mm-hmm.
Is what you see worth anything? I mean, you see it very obliquely.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're bringing up something called libration, but I don't want to steal Robert's theme here, and we're going to jump over to Richard to talk about some spiritual things. But anyway, Robert, this is interesting. I think what Bill's talking about is what we call libration, correct?
That's correct. Now, the moon is not in a perfectly circular orbit. The moon's orbit is slightly elliptical. So that means at the far point, when it's the farthest away from the Earth, it's traveling a little slower than it does when it's at its closest point. Now, the net result of that is when the moon approaches the Earth, getting close to its low point above the Earth, the net result is that it will slightly rotate a little bit to one side. And then as it recedes and goes back out toward the high point of its orbit, the opposite side will slightly roll into view, and we see a total of 9% of the far side of the moon. But that's at an extremely oblique angle. Looking at it in the telescope, I mean, you're absolutely lost. When you look at the face of the moon face on, well, you see the craters overlapping each other. The craters are round. They're easily seen. But along the lunar limb, at an extreme slant angle,
yes,
they
it's
just
amazing.
pile up on top of each other. And
Bill, excuse me for interrupting.
From another.
No, I just wanted to mention something to Bill. I've watched this many times, and you know this, Robert. And from the technical side, we don't want to get overly technical, there's the Mare Orientale, which is like the Sea of the Orient, which is way around the other end, Bill. And you can see it rarely, as Robert's describing. And it's amazing in the telescope, so we see more of that, as he explained. But, Bill, you get the last word on this. I hope that was an answer that's satisfactory. We think it is, but you get the last word. Bill, are you there? Well, I guess Bill hung up.
I think we lost him.
Well, that's okay. Let's move on to Joe in New Jersey. Good morning, Joe. You're on the Dr. Sky Experience. How are you this morning?
Dr. Sky, it's your old friend, your old Navy veteran, Joe. It's good to hear you. Thank you for taking my call and your two wonderful guests. Dr. Sky, you know I'm an Apollo lover. I got to say that, but I'm not going to go wild right now. You know, I go wild with Apollo. I love it. But I'm not going to go wild right now with that. I just got to say one thing. When I was on active duty, I was in the Mediterranean on the aircraft carrier Saratoga, 81 to 85. The most beautiful thing in the world is the ocean when we're not flying and practicing for war. But the most beautiful thing is the ocean. But there's one more thing that is more beautiful than the ocean. When we looked up into the sky, you can't imagine how beautiful the moon and the stars are unless you're out at sea. It's the most beautiful thing in the world, Dr. Sky.
You know, you bring it up. This is awesome, Joe. Let's go to Richard because, he does more of the most amazing things in my mind. I appreciate him. He talks about the romance and beauty. What do you think that Joe's, tell us about what you respond to, Joe. That's awesome. That's amazing out there in the ocean.
Well, this is what's interesting to me. We here, I live here in Santa Barbara. I live here on the coast. And I can stand at the marina and I can watch the tide go in and out because I watch the boats rise and fall. That's our perspective as we stand here on the earth. But the reality I found was it's actually the moon creating a bulge in the ocean that moves around the planet. Our perception is rise and fall, but it's just this big bulge of water that just keeps circling the globe. I don't mean that the water physically moves, but it's pulled outward by the gravitational pull of the moon. And that is so fascinating to me. And by the way, speaking of the moon landings, the money shot, as far as photos, is what you just described, Doc, and that is the shot of the Earth from the moon.
No, it's amazing.
A money shot. Yeah.
Joe in New Jersey, could you imagine being on the surface of the moon, as Dr. Mitchell is talking about? We know how beautiful the full moon is. You're describing it. Imagine seeing it 4 times the size of the biggest full moon. That's why Carl Sagan...
I can't imagine looking at anything, looking at the Earth like we look at the moon down here. It's a gift from God. It's a gift from God.
Boy, you guys are awesome. Joe, I want to thank you, and someday,
I'm going to
go ahead.
I know you got a full board.
That's all right, brother. You go right ahead.
You're 2 wonderful guests. I'm a 70s guy, Dr. Sky. You know that. You know that. And there's one show, the Mary Tyler Moore Show. If anybody wants to Google it, behind Lou Grant's desk was the map of the moon. It's great.
Absolutely, my friend.
If anybody could look up that and they see the map of the moon, that old map with the moon, everything on the moon, it was fantastic.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you in New Jersey, and we'll talk more about Apollo. But, we talked about Rosemary from the Dick Van Dyke Show. I had many experiences with her, and she was a big space fan, too. It's amazing how many stars out there, not the ones in the heavens, but what we call the movie stars, have been so much enamored. Like Shirley MacLaine, you'll hear her on this particular archive many times. Great people studying. And hey, listen, ladies and gentlemen, you're our star, because this is exactly why we do this. It's to do what? I think it's real simple. Not to give more than, like a speech, but it's to open our minds about the great mysteries of the universe, which is exactly what we're trying to do. And again, if you want to email me, if time doesn't permit, drsky@wabcradio.com. And we encourage you to go, that is, to the perennial podcast archive at wabcradio.com. And also, as we talk about Red Apple Audio Networks.com. Lots of good feedback. And don't forget, not just about me, but all the other great hosts that make up Talk Radio 77 WABC. Robert, that's amazing. I mean, we hear stories about this, people in their 70s and 80s. I meet so many people every day. I salute them. I was military for a short time in the Army, but their stories are so amazing. And so many of these people, Richard and Robert, have been so involved in the space program for such a long time. But our focus right now is to talk about the moon and talk about it. Not only, hey, folks, you may have some concerns. And Richard, I know we don't have time to go into the details, but save the answer if you can when we come back. But here's the question to Richard. There's been so much data on the births of babies around that of a full moon. And if you research it, it says, nah, that's not true, that. And also the concept that does gravity push a baby when the mother is about to give birth. We hear all these different stories, so many wonderful things that we talk about the moon. If you looked at the movie Moonstruck, oh my gosh, what a beautiful story that's been intertwined into our history of the great movies of all time. If you haven't seen that, ladies and gentlemen, see it with somebody that you care about and tell me at the end of that if that's not a beautiful story, Moonstruck. We'll be right back here on the Dr. Sky Experience as we continue to move to top of hour number 1 with our special guest, Robert Reeves, Photographic Atlas of the Moon, and Richard Dugan of Tell Me Your Story. 2 great people that are enhancing our ability to open our minds about the great stories of what's out there, things you probably don't hear, but probably had a curiosity and wanted to know more. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
When was the last time you danced in the moonlight with someone you love? Think about that. Other times people say that life is just a short dance in the sun. But Dancing in the Moonlight, King Harvest, a French-American band that actually had a good part of its history out of Ithaca, New York. As we continue here at 50 minutes after the hour, or 50 minutes past the hour, I should say, we continue with the Dr. Sky Experience. Let's continue with the callers as we wrap up hour number 1. Let's say good morning to Frank in Maine, the home of Stephen King's Dreamcatcher. You're always welcome on the show there. Good morning, Frank.
Good morning, Dr. Sky. Actually, I'm on my way to Yellowknife, the Northwest Territories in Canada. So wow. I'm calling you from the road. And I have a quick question for your guest about Apollo 17. And they captured a photo of a pyramid. Now, I know it was kind of debunked, but or it was kind of something else. But I want to know if your guest actually remembers that photo from Apollo 17. Mm-hmm. And the second part of that question I'll say later. But I want to know if your guest actually remembers that particular photo.
Interesting. Frank, as always, appreciate you being with us on the Dr. Sky Experience. Robert, any clue on that? I mean, you're more the science person in the guest community.
Well, I consider myself fairly familiar with the Apollo missions, but I'll have to admit I'm drawing a blank on any pyramid-like structure as observed by Apollo 17.
You know what I'm going to do, Frank? I'm going to talk about this. I had an opportunity to meet with Harrison Schmitt, the only geologist that went to the moon on Apollo 17. He'd be the guy to talk about it. I wonder if that's one of his rock samples or something that he saw on the surface of the moon. He was above any astronaut, probably the one that was more focused on obviously being a geologist. But I think we're drawing a blank on that, Frank, unless you have another comment or question. Bless you as you're traveling where? Where'd you say Yellowknife? Is that where you told us?
Yellowknife, yeah. It's in the Northwest Territories. It's almost out toward the Arctic Circle. It's right around the Yukon territory. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they're right next to each other. And
that's amazing because, there was a Russian satellite that many people could look up. It actually crashed in an area up there called the Great Slave Lake. I've never been there, but I think that's up in your area, and there was so much world concern that it had leaking radiation from that. See the things we talk about here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Frank, safe driving. Tell us when you get back about your illustrious trip. We'd like to hear more about it. We appreciate it. Thank you. Let's say good morning now to go to Tony in the great state of Arizona. That's where we are. Tony, you're on the Dr. Sky Experience. How are you?
Hey, thank you, Dr. Sky. It's always fascinating listening to you, the guests, and a lot of the callers, too, talking about things like this. It was brought up about the moon that I'd like to talk about as far as the topic, as well as also being a machine, meaning the machine being part of this universe we live in that are many different components. But as far as gravity goes, here's the moon, rotating around the Earth in a somewhat stagnant orbit. We always see the face of the moon going around. And what was brought up earlier is how the moon affects the Earth's tides instead of rising and falling. It's this big bulge traveling around the Earth. I'm just kind of curious, how does the moon affected by traveling around the Earth and being on the far side of the Earth and the sun, or, away from them with the Earth in between. And then when it comes around, it's in between the Earth and the sun. How is the surface of the moon, or just the moon itself, affected? Does it like compress and bulge out itself, like when you take a tennis ball? You put your hands together on top of it and you squeeze and it bulges out, and then opposite like that, and basically like the machine part of it. Here it is, all these pieces traveling around each other. They have this oddity where they're not perfect. They're just off a little bit.
Well, Tony, let's have Robert explain this. I think you're talking more about tides. And Richard, I haven't forgotten you. So on hour number 2, I'm going to jump back to you, of course, and get your take on some of the things we were asking about. And those are very interesting from the so-called, as we say, the spiritual side, about the things about births and all the other things that happen, some people say, closer to the moon. But why don't you take that one, Robert? I think what Tony's talking about in Arizona is probably more about the tides, if that's what I'm hearing correctly.
Well, the tides affect not only the oceans, but they also affect the Earth. Now, the water is easier to move, of course. The lunar gravity can pull it and rise it up and create the tides. Rising, any average tide is, at least several feet or more, depending upon where you are. But the Earth also heaves in reaction to the lunar gravity. As the moon passes overhead, the Earth, the ground you're on, will rise up about 4 centimeters. That's 4 centimeters, that's about 1.5 inches or so. And so every day the moon is lifting you up just a little bit as it passes overhead. Now, regarding the tides, he said the moon's orbit is kind of static. Well, it's not really. The interaction between Earth's tides and the moon is slowly driving the moon away from the Earth. Now, the moon recedes away from the Earth about 2.5 centimeters per year. So which means in the interval between when Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon on Apollo 11 and today, the moon has receded away about the distance of your outstretched arms.
That's amazing.
So over a period of millions of years, the moon will get smaller and smaller. And right now, the moon is just the right distance where it perfectly eclipses the sun, and we have solar eclipses. In the future, when the moon recedes further away, we'll have no more solar eclipses. The moon will.
That's right. So get in your eclipses while you can, ladies and gentlemen. Another story as we talk about in hour 2. And not to cut you off there, Robert and Richard, we're moving toward the top of hour number 1, but I want to do this. We'll talk about the eclipses and everything, and also with Richard, our very special guest who talks about his radio program, Tell Me Your Story. Let's start off with Robert as we wrap up hour number 1. Thank you, Tony in Arizona. Always appreciate your commentary and your questions contributing to the Dr. Sky experience. Robert, how do people get in touch with you? And then, Richard, how do people get in touch with you? Because we're only through with hour 1. We got another one to go. Robert?
Well, the easiest way is look me up on Facebook. I am Robert Reeves on Facebook, and when you find the right one, I am the handsome gentleman next to the telescope.
He's Robert Reeves, spelled R-E-E-V-E-S, and he is handsome, as we talk about here as we move through time and space. Richard Dugan, tell us how people can get in touch with you as what you talk about, 2 important people making the show possible.
Well, my website is richarddugan.com. Email is richard@richarddugan.com. The program Tell Me Your Story is both podcast on SoundCloud and Spotify and videocast on YouTube. And I have a book called Choices, 5 Steps for Life we can talk about one day, available on Amazon.
Boy, I'll tell you, I love you guys because I may need your help in writing my first book, and I hope you'd want to be kind enough to give me your time when we ask for that time, and maybe anybody else who's looking to get a book out there. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just touched the surface and scratched it, as they say, bringing you what I consider to be, in my humble opinion, always there's great stories about the mysteries of the universe. What do we say, ladies and gentlemen? From the Earth to the moon to the planets and on to the infinite. And as we continue to talk about these many mysteries of the universe that many of us, because our lives are driven by the sun, and we listen so much to the things that are going around us, which are important, ladies and gentlemen. But as you know, there's another world out there to explore, and obviously we appreciate you as we move into hour number 2 on the Dr. Sky Experience, 1-800-848-9222. We'll be right back with more exciting stories about the moon, spiritually, romantically, and scientifically.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
At 6 minutes after the hour, we come on the air with great information about the mysteries of the universe. From the Earth to the moon to the planets and on to the infinite, now we talk about the many mysteries of the universe. Where? On this powerhouse radio station, Talk Radio 77, WABC. And ladies and gentlemen, we love dialogue. And if you'd like to get involved with this conversation, by all means, write this number down or give us a call. 1-800-848-9222. And what's a good reason to do it? We're talking right now in this iteration of the Dr. Sky Experience with 2 people that know so much about this subject. And what is the subject? The wonders of the moon, from the spiritual side to the observational side. As we continue in hour number 2 with special guest Robert Reeves, author of the Photographic Atlas of the Moon, and Richard Dugan, radio talk show host on the West Coast, with Tell Me Your Story. Ladies and gentlemen, an interesting quote I thought I'd mention early in the program, and it was by the great Buddha, and it goes like this, and I quote, 3 things cannot be long hidden, the sun, the moon, and the truth. End quote. How appropriate for this world that we live in. Gentlemen, welcome back, and I want to remind everybody, of course, 1-800-848-9222 to get in on the conversation. And if you want to email me, that's simple, DRSKY, Dr. Sky at WABCRadio.com. And in perpetuity, all of our archived podcasts, WABCRadio.com and RedAppleAudioNetworks.com. And thanks to Tony and Bill. They're our helmsmen. What do they do? Without them, this program would be spinning off into outer space, but it's focused at you from 77 WABC to you, the nation, the world, and the cosmos. Richard, let's begin with you. I was asking about this, and I know you probably have a hell of a lot of information on it. The correlation between births and the moon, the full moon. Is there any evidence to this that you might know about, or is this just maybe something that's an old wives' tale, as they might say? What say you?
Well, that song that was played in the last hour would probably epitomize that more than anything else. Not so much the births, but the conceptions during a full moon. And there's something,
yes.
there's something about, and even, again, being outside at night, having a comfortable space to carry out that activity if you choose to do so.
There you go.
As far as births, the only correlation that I could think of would still be the same correlation as creates our tides, because there is a lot of fluid, there's a lot of water, if you will, that is part of the birthing process. And I'm not sure if the doctor would have any information on that in terms of, scientific studies. But it is fascinating even to think about even our own, 97% of our body is water. And it's no wonder that we're not affected in some way, shape, or form by the orbiting of the moon and its various cycles.
And on the dark side, not of the moon, we don't have, obviously, the source of material, and wouldn't ask both of you to comment on it. But think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Is there an increase, an influx in criminal activity during certain times and phases of the moon? And if a criminal didn't want to do something in the light of the moon, would it be a new moon? We don't know. But on the serious side, gentlemen, and everybody listening around the world, isn't it interesting how many military operations are conducted during the dark of the moon? Of course, you wouldn't want to be doing something during a full moonlight experience. And I think, Robert, you may know more about this from your military experience working with the government, that wasn't it something like D-Day? They also planned that activity in Normandy, and where they landed, sadly so many Americans died, but wasn't it due to a phase of the moon? I thought that was correct.
Yeah, well, I believe the Normandy invasion experienced an unusually high tide. And that was definitely related to the moon. But you're relating how many military operations are done during the dark of the moon.
There you go.
A lot of them are also done during bright moon, the term bomber's moon, where bombing runs done in moonlight, where the bombardiers could see their target in spite of darkness because of the moon. So it works both ways.
Very interesting. I find this fascinating. But, let's jump, Robert, to something else in your book that I think you could extrapolate on. As NASA and the Chinese and other nations around the world are seemingly focusing on the southern pole of the moon, I observe it pretty regularly. It's a little difficult to see the exact, southern pole of the moon. But isn't that interesting? In your book, there's a crater in that far southern part of the moon called Shackleton. And I would like you to explain to the audience why that might be the best location for lunar explorers to build a habitat. Tell us more about that.
Well, there's two factors involved with the South Pole. Well, the North Pole probably has similar parameters, but we're concentrating on the South Pole with the Artemis program. One is there's craters near the South Pole where their interiors never receive sunlight because the moon. Moon's axis is not tipped like the Earth. The moon does not have seasons. So at the poles, these deeply shadowed craters very well may contain water ice that has been frozen there for literally billions of years. And ice is a very valuable resource because lunar habitats will obviously need water. The water can also be broken down into oxygen and hydrogen.
Yes.
The oxygen, we need it to breathe. The oxygen and hydrogen makes rocket fuel. Now, the other point is, at the southern pole, if you're up on the rim of a crater or on a mountain peak, the sun is always in the sky. The sun will never set. It's like the midnight sun here on Earth. instead of setting, the sun just creeps around the horizon for the entire day. The same on the moon. Now that allows a moon base to get power from the sun through solar panels on a continuous basis. There will be no 2-week lunar night. The sun just creeps around the horizon, making a circle all the way around the horizon, allowing the solar panels to follow it and provide power 24/7.
How ingenious. No, that's an amazing thing. But first we have to get there. And not to knock NASA in any way, shape, or form, it seems pretty obvious to me, and many of the listeners out there would love your commentary at 1-800-848-9222 or whatever you'd like to say in our conversation in this iteration of the Dr. Sky Experience regarding what? This is so amazing. Is private enterprise going to take in a big leap as we see with SpaceX? Is NASA going to do this? Are the Chinese going to do this in 2029 with one of their great, celebrations of their existence under the Communist Chinese Party? We don't know, but I want to mention this and get your opinion on this, Robert. We had a scientist a while ago telling us about this, and I found wow, this is amazing. What he was saying, I asked him, where's the coldest place in the solar system? And he said, by all means, Dr. Sky, it's at the southern pole of the moon. And I said, say that again? And he said the temperature there was measured by spacecraft at about less or lower than 400 degrees below zero, not absolute zero. Anything like that you've heard? I mean, I heard that's the coldest place in the solar system, even beyond the planets.
Yes, that is true. Well, as I was saying, there are areas of the moon, craters on the moon's poles, that the interior never receives sunlight. So they've just been getting colder and colder and colder because they receive no warmth. Now, these places on the moon and the pole are actually colder than the planet Pluto, which is almost 4 billion miles away from the sun.
And wow, my professor got knocked out because now it's a dwarf. I mean, we had Dr. Tomball when I was out in school, and what a great guy, but not to spend time on that. Imagine how he feels in the eternal space as he moved on into the infinite. They took his planet away from him.
I'm confident that we are going to restore Pluto to planetary status.
I like you even more, Robert. Richard, do you agree with this? I mean, are you a big Pluto fan as far as getting away from a dwarf? What's your opinion on that? We know some people are very upset about it.
Yeah, and I hate the fact that people like to cast aspersions on individuals who were responsible.
Yes.
But here's the thing: nothing is written, nothing is set in concrete. Not in Congress, not in astrophysics, not in astronomy, space, aviation, or weather. So, we learn new things, we experience new things, and I do find that fascinating. That the coldest place is at the south pole of the moon. When we haven't been that far out, I don't know if Voyager 1 or 2 or any of the other probes we've sent out had thermometers on them to gauge the temperature in deep space.
I guess not. Right. You never know.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
It is. It's amazing. And that's why we say doing this is, the mysteries of the universe. I mean, think about it, folks. There's so many mysteries that I'm not qualified to talk about that go the other direction into the micro world. And here we are, Robert and Richard, talking about these amazing things in the universe. But here, I got to get both of your take on this. And let's start with Robert. We were talking here on this particular radio station and on one of the programs, Katz and Cosby, and also the Katz Roundtable that I'm privileged and honored to be a part of with owner and operator John Katzimatidis. Every Sunday, we were talking and following this asteroid 2024 YR4. And the astronomers, as many people might know, and people who don't, here's the story. Here's another object allegedly to be 200 feet in diameter, which at its highest point, ladies and gentlemen, had a 3.1% chance of hitting the Earth December 22nd, 2032. So get your holiday, Christmas, and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa shopping done ahead of time, not to be funny. But then we find out that it's changed. What do you mean it's changed? We find out that recent observations by big telescopes like James Webb and Hubble now say, here we go, Robert, this is your turn, this 200-foot object has a 4.3% chance of striking the moon. And that, to me, even though it sounds imperceptible, that number, that may be visible if it were to happen right here. And you're the expert on our show right now. Can you imagine viewing that with a telescope? Or what the heck would happen from a 200-foot object striking the moon?
Well, the flash will be dimmer than you would think. You would think a 200-foot asteroid, that's big. Well, it's really actually fairly small. Well, looking a casual observer, naked eye watching the moon when it happens, might not even notice it. But in a telescope, yes, you will see a flash. It'll be brief, lasting probably no more than 3 or 4 seconds, but it would be visible from the Earth.
Wow. Yeah, and they were saying that some of that debris, if it was impacting enough, might give us one of the best spectacular meteor showers of all time. But, not to keep droning on about this, but here's fascinating here in Arizona, and I say this to everybody listening around the nation and the world. If you haven't been, ladies and gentlemen, to the preserved crater in northern Arizona, just about 40 miles to the east of Flagstaff, it's easy to get to, and I'm not the tour director, on Interstate 40. That impactor that happened, say, 50,000 years ago, I wasn't there, of course, and you aren't, ladies and gentlemen. It was nickel iron, and it struck and made about a mile-ish crater in the ground. So what I'm saying, Robert and Richard, this is amazing. An impactor like that had the force of like a nuclear-type explosion. And I know, Robert, without revealing national secrets, you know so much about maintenance and modification of nuclear weapons. That's for another subject.
That was my first paying job, actually.
Really?
In the 1960s.
Well, I'll be a respectful journalist and not ask you specifically what did you do, but I imagine, you don't have to answer, dialing up or dialing down on the, quote, tonnage or whatever, the kilotonnage or megatonnage on whatever the heck you were near. Boy, you're a brave soul.
Well, basically it was just mechanics.
Okay.
There's very little difference between working on a nuclear weapon and then working basically on a modern car.
Wow.
The electronics, new cars have so much electronics on them that I've worked on both. And I honestly tell people that my car today is more complicated than an atomic bomb.
That's incredible. But on a lighter note, and I'm not going to ask if you did this, but if anybody dropped a screwdriver on top of the thing, I wondered if they had one of those magnetic tools that you can get from one of those discount tool locations. Imagine that. That's incredible. But that's for another story. But what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, this is interesting. Your analysis of what's happening here. Could you imagine, folks, if the moon was struck by an object like this? According to legend, and I've read this, I don't know if I believe everything I read, internet-wise, around the year, let's say 1050 or 1150 AD, it was reported that Benedictine monks actually witnessed a big blast of something coming out of the moon like a big horseshoe, it was described, in the early days before the advent of, iPads and people like that. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that. Is there any credibility to that? I mean, anybody know anything about that one? About them seeing something striking the moon?
Well, the deal with that is the English monks probably witnessed the creation of the crater we now call Giordano Bruno, which is just beyond the edge of the moon. It's on the far side of the moon. But an impactor struck and created quite a blast, and it was visible from the Earth.
There you go.
And by the naked eye, and the debris cloud showered out, and the monks visually saw that. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, in ancient England is where this observation was.
There you go. We're on the right track there. No, that's a great story. But this is it, ladies and gentlemen. You have questions about what we're talking about here. That's why we're doing this radio show. We're going to jump into right now a conversation to help everybody out there who has been mystified by how you observe the moon. And you don't necessarily have to have these monster telescopes to do it. That's great if your budget calls for it. That's great. I myself took the long, hard path when I was a kid. I had to earn it. To make $10, $20 in allowance and cutting people's lawns. We bought our first little telescope with money like that. But let's talk about this. Robert, this is interesting. City dwellers, so many in the big light-polluted areas, they go, I can't see anything in the night because it's so bright. Let's go back to the moon. What do you recommend when you're doing something? Advise them on binoculars. This is a fascinating story.
Well, the moon ignores light pollution. You can see the moon from anywhere. The city lights don't bother the moon at all. So you can observe it with your naked eye. And when you see the full moon rising above the eastern horizon, you see the face of the moon coming up. You're actually looking at the dark areas on the moon that create the face are the lunar maria, the lava fields on the moon that filled in ancient basins, giant craters on the moon that were created almost 4 billion years ago. And you were looking at the direct evidence of how impacts created the major features on the moon. Now, you can see this with your naked eye. Now, the geologic facts about their existence really weren't understood until the space age. But throughout eternity, we've looked up and seen the face of the man on the moon, not realizing the geologic significance of what those dark patches are. But today, we look at it, we see the beauty of the man on the moon, and understand the science behind it as well.
Yes.
But you can move up to a pair of binoculars and very easily see these lunar maria, each individual dark patch that creates the face of the man of the moon, and you start to see the major craters like Tycho in the southern hemisphere of the moon, this massive spread of rays. Lunar rays are the material thrown out of a crater by the impact and splashed across the face of the moon.
That's amazing.
Tycho has the largest ray structure on the moon, stretching almost 2,200 kilometers across the southern hemisphere. And then you move up toward the northern hemisphere. Copernicus crater, Kepler crater, and Aristarchus crater also have massive ray structures, and they visually, with the naked eye, you can see these as a white spot on the.
No, it's amazing. I mean, I'm a big fan of this, and to share with the audience, for years I was part of a group called ALPO, Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. We were just in high school.
Yeah, we're very familiar with them.
Yeah, and we actually had this project called Lunar Dome Observations. And for people going, what the heck is that? When the sun was rising on the moon, we'd do these sketches because we didn't have telescope, we didn't have cameras. So we provided information on these bumps that are on the surface of the moon that may have been volcanic at one time. But the whole geology of the moon is just so fascinating, a story that continues. But gentlemen, what I want to do, and I hope the audience wants to get involved in this at 1-800-848-9222, what is it that we'd like you to get involved in? We're going to talk about eclipses. Now, this is something really special to myself, and I'm sure many of you out there. I wonder, how many of you experienced the blood red moon eclipse, meaning a total lunar eclipse? How many of you have observed, hopefully safely, a partial eclipse of the sun? How many of you observed a partial eclipse of the moon? So we're going to find out all about the dynamics of how that works. But let's talk about total solar eclipses in the next half hour, because we got a couple of biggies coming up. And I'm not involved in any tour group on this, but ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see the longest total solar eclipse probably in our lifetime, mark the date. I know you know this, Robert, and I think Richard may also have this down. August 2, 2027. Now, that's not all that far away. A few years ago, I was going, wow, when we watched the eclipse in 2017 in Idaho, oh my gosh, that's a long way off. But guess what? It will be visible at its best if you are in the area in southern Egypt, right next to so many of the locations of the pyramids. This will be fascinating because it's going to be over a 6-minute and some second eclipse. Now, if you go, wait a minute, I'm going to travel halfway around the world to see that. That is going to be quite spectacular near Luxor. I've never been there. But ladies and gentlemen, who knows, by maybe the power of this radio show and station, maybe we will someday be joining up in forces because, right, Robert, and right, Richard, that has symbology, sacred geometry, right, guys? Isn't that incredible?
Yep, the Valley of the Kings and a total solar eclipse overhead.
And how many have you seen in your life, if you don't mind me asking, total ones? How many have you been witnessed?
I've seen 2, 2017 and the more recent one about a year ago.
And Richard, you saw them? I'm sure you've seen all types of these, but how many total? Have you seen any totals? That's amazing.
Lunar eclipses that I can recall, only one. It was back, I don't know if it was in the late 90s or early 2000s. It was when we were still living in Phoenix. And, oh my heavens, what a spectacular event to watch. The only frustration was I had to keep moving the telescope because the moon would not sit still.
Oh, absolutely. And on a personal note, back in April of last year, as everybody knows, we were down in Junction, Texas, and our hearts go out, God bless the people, in that area from Kerrville and all through that area. One of the most hellacious floods, a big century type of event. And really, that's just the most heartbreaking thing, because that is in Texas Hill Country, a most amazing area, and great people down there. And if you like food, folks, great barbecue down there, too. And who doesn't like good barbecue, right, guys? That's amazing.
Yep, that's just up the road from where I live.
Yeah, there you go. I'm sorry, I keep remembering. You're in where? San Antonio, is that correct?
San Antonio.
Well, God bless. The Alamo. There you go. So, folks, one more time, 1-800-848-9222. Don't be shy. Your questions and comments. Let's talk about what your experiences were. Did you have any experiences seeing lunar and total solar eclipses? And maybe you were sitting right down in downtown Manhattan when you saw the partiality. Maybe you were out in the middle of nowhere like we were when we were up in Idaho in a beautiful location called Rexburg, Idaho in August of 2017. So many wonderful things here, ladies and gentlemen, as we talk about this. And don't forget, email me. I love the emails. It's DRSKY, Dr. Sky, at WABCRadio.com. Great information that you folks send us about all kinds of questions about the universe. And remember, the main tenet of the radio show, if you're a new listener, hopefully you'll stay tuned each week as we provide you, in our opinion, with the best guests we can from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and why not American exceptionalism, the story of America, and why we're so proud, or should be proud, of this great nation. We'll be right back after these important announcements.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
32 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience. The phone lines are lighting up, as we would expect, with our two great guests, Robert Reeves, author of many books, The Photographic Atlas of the Moon, and Richard Dugan, seasoned talk show host. Tell me your story. Let's go to the callers. Let's say good morning to Sherilyn, as we say to our friends up in Canada. Good morning to you, Sherilyn. How are you?
Good morning. I absolutely love your show. Wish it was on 5 nights a week.
Thank you. Blessings to you.
Yes. My question is basically for possibly the future, but the future comes pretty fast. Is there any answers to what's going to happen with everything going to the moon, going on to Mars, when the fossil fuel stuff all goes down, because they certainly can't manage these space ships with batteries? Have they ever thought of what they're going to do?
Wow. Sherilyn, you bring up good points. Robert, I think that's in your wheelhouse more so.
I'll admit that I could not understand the very end of her commentary.
Sherilyn, please repeat what you were saying at the end. I had a hard time myself.
Okay. Right now, of course, they're ending supposedly down the road fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. And how do they think they're going to put spaceships up in towards the moon, towards Mars, even up to the space station? Because they certainly can't put batteries on those things and send them up. Have they ever thought what they're going to do?
Good point. Robert, did you hear that clearly?
Yes, fossil fuels. Well, actually, the rocket engines that SpaceX uses doesn't rely on, or the Starship, the spacecraft that they're preparing to go to the moon, to send men to the moon on the Artemis mission, doesn't use kerosene. It uses liquid methane, which is an entirely different chemistry. Some people would say, well, it's still a chemical, which would be fossil derived, because methane is the result of various decompositions of things in the earth, but it's not a petroleum-based fuel. So the future spacecraft that are going to be going to the moon will not be powered by petroleum. They're going to be powered by methane and liquid oxygen.
Wow. Sherilyn, that's a good answer, I think. I mean, you're right about the end game maybe of fossil fuels, so there is hope for the future. But you get the last word, Sherilyn. Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just concerned about that, because they're talking about when they're sending people up again, and it's in the future, and I'm thinking, well, what if there's always these protesters and everything want all that kind of stuff shut down? So I just didn't know how they were going to try to get around that.
Well, Sherilyn, thank you for calling us from Canada, and we do appreciate our Canadian friends and hope you'll be continuing. As you say, you enjoy the show. Blessings to you.
Like Friday night, I always say, Dr. Sky's on. I got to put the radio on.
Well, you're so kind, and thank you so much, and to you and all the other listeners around there. You know, Sherilyn, I'm going to brag on Robert for a second. He and his wife, Mary, blessings to both of them, have actually sequential asteroids named after them. So if you're wondering what that means out there, folks, is that certain people, not myself, I don't know about you, Richard, I guess you and I haven't had one, right? But you have asteroids named sequentially after, obviously, your name and your wife, Mary. That's a high compliment, and that's amazing. Tell us how that happened. That's amazing.
Well, the asteroid serial number, when an asteroid is discovered, it's given a serial number. In the case of mine, it was asteroid 26591. In the case of Mary, my wife, it was asteroid 26592. Now, once an asteroid is named, well, then it retains that serial number, but it also has the name applied to it. In my case, it's asteroid Robert Reeves 26591. Mm-hmm. Now, the International Astronomical Union that regulates the naming of astronomical features did not want two Reeveses in a row on the asteroid list, so we had to name asteroid 26592 Mary Renfro after my wife's maiden name.
Wow.
But we still are the only husband and wife team that have sequential serial number asteroids. There's about a dozen husband and wife asteroid teams, but Mary and I are the only two that have next door neighbor asteroids. We both orbit between Mars and Jupiter. I orbit every 4 years. Mary orbits every 4.4 years. So I'm continuously chasing her around the solar system.
I love that. Now, that's a beautiful story. Richard, don't you think that's quite... I love that story. That's so beautiful. And it's something you can't go out in the store. No, you can't, folks. Just buy one of these things. It has to be appointed to you. So that's amazing. We really talk about that. So let's continue with our callers as we move on here on the Dr. Sky Experience. You guys are lighting up the phone lines. Let's say good morning to Christy in the state of Massachusetts. Good morning, Christy. How are you doing today?
Good morning. What an honor to speak to all three of you. The Pearl by John Steinbeck is an incredible, very short novella where the full moon totally brings the conclusion of a great mystery novel. Have you heard of the Pearl? The gentleman, I forget his name, who wanted to talk about symbolism and whatever of the full moon. That is a classic, and I would think he would know about that book.
Richard, I'm turning that over to you from Christie in Massachusetts. What say you?
Well, I can't say as I've ever read the book. I've heard of it, and other folks who have done the same kind of thing in connection with astrology, with sacred geometry, and also creating various rituals and ceremonies around the various phases and different seasons that we go through. So, yeah, there are a lot of communities in this country and around the world who have they're not necessarily worshiping the moon, but they have great reverence for the moon and just the natural world.
That's interesting, Christy. That's fascinating. I have nothing to say about it. I haven't read it, but tell us, without spoiling the book for everybody who'll read it, just give us the general synopsis there, at least something.
Someone is stealing a very large pearl, and this person kind of deserves to steal it. He's a real immigrant worker and blah, blah, blah. And the pearl really makes you think of a full moon. It's like that gorgeous and big and beautiful. And it's a full moon when he actually tries to execute it. So it had some consequences because of that. And not spiritual, but in terms of lighting. It's a really easy, quick read. It's incredible. It's one of John Steinbeck's best books.
Christy, thank you so much for being part of the show, and we get a lot of education, not only from our guests, but also by our callers. Hope you have a great morning, and you'll continue to listen to our Dr. Sky Experience and various guests. Let's continue down the caller line here before we go to the next break. Let's say good morning to Robert in Philadelphia. Robert, good morning to you. How are you today?
Hi, Dr. Sky. Good to talk to you and your guests, Robert and Richard. I really appreciate your information. You guys mentioned Pluto earlier, and before I get to my question, I just wanted to point out that our as long as our country has been around since the Declaration of Independence, Pluto has just completed one orbit around the sun. Oh, yeah. 248 years. That's crazy. But the question I had, it had to do with the moon. And I was reading how the lunar orbiter and some Saturn V upper stage rockets were crashed into the moon, and it resulted in what seismologists called some sort of reverberation, almost like there was a hollow moon or hollow spaces in the moon. And I was wondering what your guests thought, what caused that. And now that you mentioned the asteroid, I want to throw that in. What would happen if that asteroid hit the moon, seismology?
Robert, very good points you're bringing up. And this is amazing. To another Robert Reeves, this is fascinating. You're right. These spacecraft, Robert, in Philadelphia, were intentionally sent into the lunar surface. Robert, tell us about this. This is great.
Well, the lunar orbiter spacecraft were fairly small. They were photographic satellites that mapped the moon to look for landing sites for the Apollo program. And when they were crashed into the moon, it was simply to get them out of the way. So their radio transmissions wouldn't interfere with subsequent missions. Their missions were over, so they were deliberately crashed into the moon. Now, the Apollo upper stages, the S4B upper stage on the Saturn V, that's a substantial piece of equipment. It was deliberately crashed into the moon during the later Apollo missions, so the seismometers left by earlier missions could study the reverberations of the impact. Now, this whole thing about a hollow moon type thing was a misunderstanding. When the S4B struck the moon the first time, the scientist who was studying the seismic shock through the moon said the moon rang like a bell. That was misinterpreted by many people to think the moon was hollow. It is not. It was just a figure of speech. It's like when we say the dark side of the moon, the far side of the moon isn't dark. That's just a reference to the unknown, like we used to say darkest Africa as an unexplored Africa. Well, it's all figure of speech. The moon does have reverberations to it through a very strong impact, be it an asteroid or a deliberately crashed large spacecraft. And these are very useful for studying the interior of the moon to understand the layers of how it's built, how big the core of the moon is, the geology below the surface of the moon. So it's all very interesting science, but the moon is not hollow. It was just a misinterpretation of a figure of speech.
Well, thank you for that revelation, Robert Reeves. But I want to say something to Robert in Philadelphia. Robert, I heard last time, and we're running out of time as we go to the break here, what I'd like to talk with you someday is we talk about your time with the F-15, if you don't mind sharing that with us, because we have many pilots on here. And in weeks to come, ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll be very impressed. We're going to be talking more about the development of some of the American incredible jet fighters, the F-22, the F-15. So, Robert, if you're still with us, I'd love to have you share some of the information with us, too, if you'd be so kind, on the Dr. Sky Experience. Thank you for calling us. We appreciate you a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up on that last break as we move toward the top of hour number 2. Still time, 1-800-848-9222. And we haven't forgotten you, Tony in New Jersey and Fred in Illinois. If you're still on the line, we'll do our very best to get you on with Richard Dugan and Robert Reeves as we hear on the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
How about that? 49 minutes after the hour has moved to the top of hour number 2. I said hello today and had a nice conversation with Max Barrett Jr., Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies. He wants to come on here and do a show, as one day we'll talk more with celebrity guests. And just a programming note, the last Saturday of every month, I'm honored to be a presenter on a dinner cruise here in Arizona on this beautiful boat called the Dolly Steamboat. DollySteamboat.com. If you're ever out this way, you'll love the Nighttime Sky program. But we hear a repeat, and I say that with all sincerity, that time. But we're playing in honor of the Apollo 11 landing on the moon. Don Iles, a 22-year-old student, he described himself as a hippie back then. He was an engineering student at MIT, and he developed the landing software for the Apollo 11 and all the Apollos. Tune in tomorrow. That is midnight on Saturday to 2 a.m., Sunday morning Eastern Daylight Time, for Don Iles. A great story. Let's continue with the callers as we say good morning. You've been holding on a long time. Fred in Illinois. Good morning. Thanks for being with us. How are you?
Yes, I have two questions. Does the moon still have an active core?
Okay, and you have a second question?
Yes, the asteroid belt. Is that what the moon uses to hold up its trousers?
See, every once in a while we get a funny man on here, but you know what? It actually does liven up the program a little, as long as there's no profanity per FCC rules and regulations. But that was a nice try, though. He got through. But there you go. He waited a long time, too. Let's move on to maybe another serious caller to the Dr. Sky Experience. Let's say good morning to Don in Long Beach. Don, let's see what you have to say.
Hi, gentlemen. I hate to bring this up, but one day, you know better than I how long that will be. The moon's orbit will deteriorate, and it's going to come crashing down. What would the effect be on life on Earth if that happens?
Wow, Don in Long Beach. Good concern. Robert Reeves. Wow, that's a depressing one to think about, but a good question.
Yeah. Well, not one that we need to worry about. I wouldn't skip your next house payment over that. What's going to happen is the moon is now slowly receding away from the Earth. Now it's going to get out to a point, billions of years from now, where it will slowly start to recede back toward the Earth. But in about 5 billion years, the sun is going to blow up into a red supergiant and completely envelop the inner planets. Mercury, Mars, Venus, the Earth, the moon will be swallowed up by the sun before the moon can crash back down on us. So,
we have a lot of time, right there.
Yeah, we've got a lot of time, and keep the house payments going.
It's amazing. You know, Don, seriously, if you're still with us, you bring up some good points, because what we are hearing from Robert Reeves, it's accurate. The moon is receding away from us, but the reality is, what if, and I think the biggest alarmist thing, and I don't want to put people into a bad mood here as we try to educate by giving examples, the asteroid threat that we don't know, meaning the asteroid that comes from the far side of the sun, let's say, where we don't have telescopic observation. We're not hoping that happens anytime soon. But we'll keep you posted here on the Dr. Sky Experience all about asteroid 2024 YR4. Remember, folks, December 22nd, 2032, it had a 3.1% chance of hitting the Earth. Now, people go, that's ridiculously small. Now, a 4.3% of maybe hitting the moon as a 200-foot in diameter object. Wow, that's amazing stuff. Don in Long Beach, you get the last word if you're still there. Okay.
I just want to thank you for that information. It was very useful, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Always appreciate you and all the callers here to the Dr. Sky Experience. Like I mentioned before, email me because of time as it runs short, drsky@wapcradio.com. Always happy to answer your questions, and we thank our very special guests. So as we wrap up the show, Robert, let's start with you, the photographic atlas of the moon. How do people get it? And again, you were mentioning how you have a Facebook page. People can go there. Tell us how to get in touch with you.
Well, the photographic atlas of the moon is available in brick-and-mortar bookstores because it is published by Firefly Books, based in Canada. They ship worldwide throughout the world, and of course, it's also available on Amazon. Both of my books, Exploring the Moon with Robert Reeves and the Photographic Atlas of the Moon, are available on Amazon.
Very nice. Beautiful time with you, and I hope we do this again, because if you get the book, ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking at it here on my desk as we do our little radio studio here to do this program. And this is incredible. I mean, the imaging, real quick, where are these images that you took? I mean, in many cases, or are these images from spacecraft? I'm just curious.
No, they're all mine. I took them from my observatory on top of my garage in my backyard here in San Antonio.
That's amazing, because I'm looking at one of my favorite regions of the moon for a time, another time in the future, the crater Plato in the Alpine Valley. That's amazing. I thought these were lunar reconnaissance orbiter images. Boy, you must have some clear skies. What size telescope are you using to image? Just tell us.
Throughout the entire time I've been imaging the moon, it's anywhere from an 8-inch celestron up to a 14-inch celestron.
My goodness. No, that's incredible.
At this point, I have a telescope for every day of the week.
God bless you, and I hope we have you back here. Robert Reeves, the best to you and your family. We'll talk again, and I'd look forward to having you back here. That's amazing, folks. If you look at this, if you look at the detail on these pictures, and I've been a lunar observer like Robert, but I have no book. All I can say is, from one observer to another, you knock this out of the whole stratosphere. That's a beautiful thing. Richard Dugan,
it's been a blast talking with you.
No, God bless you and your family. Richard Dugan, tell us how people can get in touch with you, talking about the other side of the equation, the romance and beauty and the mysteries of the universe, from more of, how do I say this, the philosophic side. Tell us about how people get in touch.
Philosophic, spiritual, esoteric. My email address, richard@richarddugan.com. Website is richarddugan.com. Podcasts are on SoundCloud, Spotify, and on YouTube. And my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life, available on Amazon. So hope that folks will pick up that as well. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of the Dr. Sky experience.
Always a privilege and honor to everybody out there. We thank you equally here on this radio show. The Dr. Sky experience here started back in about March of this year, continuing strong. And again, a big shout out and thank you to owner and operator John Katzimatidis and the executive staff for providing this opportunity as we change our minds from the regular political stories of the world, for the most part, very important to us in our daytime lives, but exploring the wonders of the universe. And we end our show tonight by talking about the Sky Report and what's happening in the heavens. As we were talking before with Robert Reeves, the moon, I got a picture of it. It's only 1.28 days old. What does that mean in English? Simple English. The moon, very low to the horizon, a thinnest of slender crescents. It continues to move on as it's past its new moon phase. We find out the moon, ladies and gentlemen, will interfere as it grows in brilliance, but that's not something not to be paying attention to. What happens in August? We find out we come to a first quarter moon on August 2, the beautiful Sturgeon moon on the 9th, and then we're back to last quarter on the 16th, and new moon once again. The best time to observe the heavens, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, is when that particular moon obviously is not shining so brightly, to take a look at some of the things that are happening. There's an interesting meteor shower that's happening on the night of the 30th into the 31st. Look to the southern sky. The moon will be out of the way from about midnight to sunrise. We call it the Southern Delta Aquarid from the zodiac constellation of Aquarius. Some activity should be seen in dark and clear skies. And the big meteor shower of the year, unfortunately this year, the Perseids, the big famous one of all, usually peaks on the 11th and 12th of August. A full moon on the 9th will wash out most of the meteors, but, in Dr. Sky's opinion, slow-moving meteors are starting to pick up in intensity. So the Perseid meteor shower is now underway, even though it's a small amount, before it reaches the peak. What do? You look into the northeast sky from about 1 a.m. till sunrise, if you can do that. The clearer the sky, the moon is not going to affect you. So if you lie back in a lawn chair and take a look at the wonders of the universe, you may get to see some of the so-called shooting stars from an interesting comet that passed the sun a long time ago called Swift-Tuttle, one of the most amazing comets in history. Because of all the objects in the solar system, the comet Swift-Tuttle comes closest to the Earth, and not to be a naysayer. One day it may get, unfortunately, too close, but at least you can see the tears of St. Lawrence as they've been described before, the beauty of this debris. From the tail of comets, the size of the grain of sand in most cases, and maybe like that of a crunched-up breakfast cereal. I want to again thank the guys behind the curtain there. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony and Bill navigating the powerful signal. of Talk Radio 77 WABC with the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll continue on, ladies and gentlemen. Your comments and suggestions at drsky at WABCRadio.com for great guests from the realms. We appreciate you. Clear skies, health, and happiness. And above all, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the wonders of the universe on the highway that has no tolls. Thank you for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?